Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
In this thread, actual paranormal things that happened to you. No LARPs, what kind of experiences have you had? All of mine have been related to sleep paralysis, which in my opinion does not get enough analysis from the science community. Not all negative. I had one where I felt the bed sag behind me and the most incredible sense of euphoria and warmth washed over me, as though a loved one was hugging me. Another interesting one was I was locked up in my bed and heard music very faintly, but it was beautiful. It slowly got louder and louder and more intense. I never wanted it to stop. Then the sound of an audience laughing was deafening, and when I snapped out of it, I realized I was hearing an arrangement I'd been messing around with on guitar, done with more intricate and beautiful voicings. I wish to God I could remember how it sounded.
2 consecutive nights, weird things happened in my house at night. I have 2 brothers and we all still live with our parents. My brothers and I have our rooms on the 2nd floor and my parents have theirs on the 1st floor. One night everyone was already sleeping and I was watching a horror movie, and I clearly remember a banging sound at the front door, multiple times. I freaked out. I have to add that it was around 4 a.m. and I was using headphones, but still was able to hear it. I thought it was a sound effect from the movie, so I went back several times wishing to hear the sound, but I didn't, and I was not brave enough to go downstairs and check, so I closed my laptop and went to sleep. The next morning I was hoping someone would mention it, but they were all acting normally, and I decided to keep it to myself. The day overall was unremarkable. My brothers were not going to be home that night. I sleep with the door of my room open most of the time, and from my room I can see the stairs leading to the living room and the front door. That night I heard no banging on the front door, but I saw the lights of the living room going on and off twice, then remained on for I want to say at least 3 minutes and then went off. When that happened, I called my dad several times, because he does wake up at night to have a snack every now and then, but he didn't answer, and my voice was loud enough. Can't really describe how I felt when nobody answered, but I froze up for a bit. I grabbed a baseball bat, but then the lights went off and remained like that. I fell asleep and woke up the next morning to my mother calling me for breakfast. I told her about it that morning and my dad as well when he got home from work. My dad said he did not wake up at all last night. He was very tired. After that, I had a hard time sleeping for several nights, but nothing ever happened again. Don't know what it was, and I don't know if this counts as paranormal, but it was scary enough to me.
Well, this ended up being way longer than I thought it would be because I can't shut the F up. I think I was around 19 at the time, and it was October, so my friends and I were in the mood to be spooked by scary things. We got online and looked at the, supposedly, most haunted places in our city. One of the more interesting places was a decent-sized park that people claimed to see shadow people at. We waited until 11-ish at night and drove over to the park and started exploring. We were there for a while. Probably 45 minutes to an hour, just hanging out by a big memorial statue thing. It was located on top of a small hill. The hill wasn't high or anything, but it was in the center of a big clearing. There were lots of trees in the park, but from where we were looking out into all of the trees from this big clearing. Our eyes were playing tricks on us, and we started to think that we saw people moving around in the trees. We all knew that we weren't really seeing anything, and it was probably the cold weather and staring at so many dark light shapes for so long. There were scattered lights in the park to light the path, so it wasn't completely dark. We eventually got bored and decided to follow the sidewalk further into the trees before we left. The website had claimed that there was a creepy house in the trees, and there are urban legends of a witch living it in. Obvious spooky kid stories, but whatever. We followed the path for probably 5 minutes, surrounded by large trees on all sides, and I noticed something that caught my eye. Probably 40 or 50 feet in front of me, there was a tree off to the right of the sidewalk, and it looked like someone was peeking out from behind the tree, so I only could see his head and the tip of his shoulder. The shape was pitch black and had absolutely no features, and I shrugged it off as just a shadow from other trees or branches above or something. It was noticeably darker than its surroundings. I kept my eye on the shape as we approached the tree it was hiding behind. I was sure it was nothing, but just in case someone was watching us and was going to attack us or something, I didn't want to just ignore it. We got maybe 20 feet or so from the tree, and in the next second, the following happened. The shape was gone. My brain immediately began to try to process where it went, and my first instinct was that I must have blinked, and due to my positioning and the light, the shadow was no longer visible. Just as that thought came to my head, one of my friends, who was probably 5-10 paces behind me, started flipping shit. "No way! What the hell?" I could hear the fear in his voice, so I immediately took off towards the tree. At this point, I wasn't concerned with whatever the implications were of me finding someone behind the tree. I just wanted to prove to myself that it was either a real person behind it or there was nobody there at all. I wanted answers, and if I gave the person time to get away, I wouldn't have any. To explain the next part, I'll say that I've had some paranormal experiences in the past that I personally know I experienced, but I understand that nobody would believe me because anecdotal evidence is the weakest form of evidence. So at this moment in time, experiencing something that my friend reacted to exactly when I noticed it, my first and only goal was to prove that we had both seen the same exact thing before either of us told each other what we had seen. I ran towards the tree. I started yelling to my friend to shut the hell up and don't say shit. I made sure he didn't say what he wanted to. The other guys we were with, 4 or 5 of them, were all really freaked out and confused at all of the sudden drama. I ran to the tree, looked around it, looked around several other trees, and nobody was there. There was never any sign of anyone being there, no noises of footsteps crunching in the leaves, nothing. Turns out he saw exactly what I did. He explained it as what looked like a human head and shoulder peeking out and watching us from behind the tree. Then suddenly it was gone. It was darker than the night around us, and after we had messed around and tried to get a good idea of how tall the thing was, we figured it must have been 8-10 feet tall, way taller than we were, to have its head as far up as we saw it. The trees didn't have any low branches at all, so someone hanging out in the tree wasn't an option. YouTube was a thing back then. This was around 2010-ish, but it wasn't like it is now. At the time of this experience, I had never heard of or seen anything like this. Now I've seen so many videos with the exact same thing happening to people. I never believe paranormal videos online, but these all look exactly like what I witnessed. A pure black head and shoulder shape peering out from behind something, watching the person recording, then very quickly pulling their head in and disappearing. Just last night, I was watching videos, and this reminded me of that night 9 or so years ago. My friend and I keep in touch, but we aren't close. We haven't brought up that story for years now. The only reason I was reminded of it was because my girlfriend asked me if I'd ever had any scary experiences I couldn't explain. I sent the video to him and asked him if it reminded him of anything, and he started talking about how creepy it was that it was exactly what we had seen in the park that day. It's so creepy knowing that we both saw what we saw. It solidified the fact that it wasn't my imagination seeing it, that it was real. It's even creepier knowing that these other people have seen the same thing, and whatever these dark, shadow people are, they really might be real. It makes me think that there are some sort of beings just watching us all from the shadows, and we have no idea. I don't want to shill any YouTubers or anything, so if you want to see the video I'm speaking of, try to look up shadow person in plane or something along those lines.
Stopped into a local dive bar one cold autumn night about 10 years ago. Just got off work, dead tired, but I knew sleep wouldn't come. Insomnia is a hell of a drug. The place is mostly dead, as I remember it being a Monday night. Couple guys, shooting pool, unfriendly bartender, older dude, 70s maybe, nursing a pint at the bar. End up talking to him as he seems lonely. He buys me a couple pints. We're both Army vets, so we talk about our service. As the night goes on, he talks about how he used to work for the town public works department, which entailed going into the local sewers for regular inspections, etc. Asks me if I want to hear something really crazy. Sure. Tells me how some 30 years prior, when he was in the sewers, he turned a corner down there and saw a giant spider web spanning the entire walkway with all rats and dogs and kitties wrapped up in it. tells me that the walkway was at least 6 feet across. One dog wrapped in the web looked to be a German Shepherd breed. They hightailed it out of there and told the supervisor or whoever what they had seen, and instead of disbelieving them, he hired guys with flamethrowers to go burn it. Never learned what came of it after that, as he switched jobs and never went back into the sewer. Apparently, a couple small children had also disappeared in the area around that time. Just kind of brushed it off with a, "Man, that's crazy," thanked the guy for the beers, and walked home. But I still remember the look on the old man's face as he told me the tale. He was white with terror.
I have had a lot of them, but I will tell you one. I was thinking about this one recently. It started with my dad in World War II. He was the sergeant of a platoon. The new lieutenant got his dumb ass killed doing something stupid. The platoon lost 6 lieutenants while my dad was the one sergeant, so my dad was back in command again. I will just leave out a lot of the war story and get to the reason for the spook. The objective was a machine gun nest in a German farmhouse. The platoon had plenty of ammo, so my dad ordered them to sneak in through the woods and just shoot the shit out of the farmhouse. It was an active farm and all the men were gone to war, so he assumed that a wife and their children were working the farm and they were probably down in the basement. My dad was also a psychic, so he was most likely right about that. He was thinking they would just wait a while till the soldiers bled out, then get the woman and children out of the farmhouse. For some reason, he felt like he should do that. While he was still waiting, there was smoke, and then he saw a fire. One of his men had, without orders, gone up to the farmhouse and set it on fire. He was not about to send his men into a burning building, so he took them on to the next objective. Many years later, my dad was getting us all ready to go out somewhere. I was all ready to go. My mother was in the kitchen doing something, so I went to my parents' bedroom to tell my dad that I was all ready. He was going through a chest of drawers looking for something, and I lay down on the bed while I was waiting for him. I closed my eyes, and I was wide awake, not dreaming. Something pushed me down deep in the bed. I opened my eyes, and no one was there, and I was still way down deep in the bed. My father saw what was going on, and he said, "Leave my kid out of this." I could hear a woman telling me, "Tell your father that a commanding officer is responsible for what his men do." Then she let me up. I got out of the bed, and I told him, "The lady told me." "You heard her? She spoke to you?" "Yes, the lady said to tell you that a commanding officer is responsible for what his men do." And he said, "Commanding officer?" Then he said to the entire room, and he turned around as he said this, "Commanding officer? I am not anyone's commanding officer. I am just a soldier. That is all. Just a soldier obeying orders. I am not an officer." Years later, he told me that the woman never bothered him again after that day, and he thanked me for helping him by telling him what she said. She had been saying things to him in his dreams, but he never could remember what she said when he woke up. To me, it must have been the mother of the children in that farmhouse.
Be me, be a kid in a Pacific Island area working part-time at a rental car place. Everyone is cool and it isn't too bad of a job cleaning and parking the rental cars. Older Pacific Islander lady there, she is nice. Co-workers tell me she is a witch and jokingly tell me never to piss her off, whatever .jpg. One day, a loud, rude, obnoxious Australian guy rents a car. Nothing is good enough for him, and he insults everyone, but he is some kind of bigwig, so we have to put up with his BS. He insults witch lady. Co-workers all turn pale. As he leaves, the witch lady starts mumbling under her breath and moving her hands. I watch, but my co-workers grab me and pull me away. Witch lady is casting a spell, don't look .mauve. Next day, I show up for work, and there is a wrecker there with the remains of the rental car the Australian was driving. Dried blood all over the mangled car. The manager says the guy lost control while driving on a smooth, straight, non-crowded road. The witch lady walks around smiling all day.
I have a couple of stories to share. Visiting Grandma's house, be like 12 years old. The house is said to be the first built in the area. The place is now a city, but a few decades ago it was meadow. A cousin that lives with my grandmother is always freaking out about ghosts that drag her feet during the night, and also some poltergeist shenanigans. Me, an intellectual, dismissed her claims because I'm a man of science. That night I went to sleep as usual in one of the guest rooms but woke up at 3:30. To my surprise, at the end of the bed there was a girl standing there ominously, just like PIC-related. I feel like my lungs are completely empty, and I'm unable to say anything, and I'm frozen in place for like 5 seconds. For a brief moment I regain control of my body and immediately cover behind the blankets. Since this was like 10 years ago, I didn't have a cell phone. The only thing I had with me at that moment was my old trusty Casio F91. I spent the rest of the night under the blankets spamming the light button on my watch because I didn't want to sleep and was very anxious. I fell asleep around 5 a.m., and when I woke up, my dad just laughed at me. My cousin told me that she had seen her multiple times. Told myself to never sleep alone again in that house. A couple of years after this incident, in another visit, we had some poltergeist activity. The restroom door slammed, and the lock, like PIC-related, was set in a locked position. Because that day we were holding some family party and everyone got scared. My dad was asking whoever was inside what was going on, but there was no answer at all. Things started to go tense since we started to speculate that someone might have fainted inside, so my dad and uncle slammed the door, but there was nobody inside. And for the last story, this one happened a couple months ago. Visiting Grandma once again. This is happening during my semester, so I'm tired. It's 8 a.m. in the morning. Looking for somewhere to take a nap. There is only one room, but it's the one that doesn't have any windows, but the door is just in front of the kitchen, where my grandma spends all day. So I let the door open and just lay in bed. Even with the door open, the room is quite dark, but still I can see everything fairly well. My grandma tells me that if I want to sleep, I can close the door so the light doesn't bother me. I remember the night that I saw the girl and just tell her that it doesn't bother me. At some point I fell asleep. I wake up suddenly. I hear both my grandma, my dad, and an aunt joking loudly. I realize that I'm paralyzed and the door of my room is closed. I can only see the light filtering through the duct vent in the ceiling and from below the door. Feel like being watched. Ah shit, here we go again. .jpg. The only thing discernible in the room was the walls, since they were white, and to my surprise, hovering just above my feet, it's the girl again, but I could only see her silhouette. I had the same sensation. Breath was non-existent. Paralysis. But this time I wasn't that scared. I kept hearing everyone joking outside and was just there being spooked by some girl. After a couple seconds, she vanished and I was able to move again, but didn't tell anyone.
Grew up in a large house, deep in the woods. Have a large front door and an entry foyer. Wood floor and seating that extends to separate wings of the home. From that position, I can turn right and see 40 feet to where the east wing begins, where it opens into the front kitchen. Other than that, it's 40 feet of empty space until then. Nothing but a long, empty dining table. Dreamt. I was facing the east wing and saw something peeking its head around the corner at me. White. Goosebumps texting this out. Want to stop going to finish? That's the dream. I immediately begin to dread the foyer, dining room, front kitchen, and east wing all together. My brother and sister used to live down there and had since moved to college. An empty entire portion of the home remained quiet and dark all through the night. I began using a separate entrance to the home to avoid the front door. Locked hallways connecting me to the foyer central room. Essentially locked down several unused doors and rooms no one used and had no traffic. I begin to sleepwalk. Unknown to me, my mother tells me. Says came in their room and was messing with their light switch. Told me to stop. Says I grunted. Says she told me to go back to bed and said I left the room. She thinks it's funny. I'm freaked. She's all about not waking a sleepwalker, etc. Long story short, I woke up standing into the pitch black of the foyer. Feel the hardwood on my bare feet. The absolute dread and terror I experienced looking down into the thick darkness into the east wing. I flung myself to the front door. screaming and wiping my hands everywhere to find the locks and doorknob. High bolt, deadbolt, door lock. I can't express the horror of these frantic moments in the dark. I open the door and sprint across the lawn, not looking back until I reach the gate. I sat at the gate until my dad's car left for work that morning, roughly an hour later. 4-ish a.m. Done telling the story. That's all.
I'm about 15 years old. Living in an apartment, one of the neighbors is this old man my parents would hang out with to drink and play poker. Very, very nice and charismatic guy. One day, I had this weird dream. I'm in front of the elevator, waiting for it so I can go home. Elevator comes, the old man, let's call him John, is there, and he greets me, charismatic as always. Anon, how are you, bud? Man, I ran a lot of errands lately, I'm tired. What about you? Hey, sir, I'm doing all right. We talk for a bit, chit-chat, like how's school, etc. Eventually, the elevator stops. It's his floor. Well, time to go. He looks at me with this serious look for the first time ever. Anon? You are a really good kid. You are like a grandson to me. There's nothing but success in front of you. You were born to do great things. I just know it. Confused.x. Thanks, sir. That means a lot to me. He gives me this huge, I'm proud of you look and pat me in the back. See you around, kid. He leaves the elevator. Wake up. Get ready to go to school thinking about how weird that dream was. I left my room. Mom was running around the house getting clothes, coats, etc. Dad is drinking whiskey at 8 a.m. Anon, you're not going to school today. John died last night. Literally go limp, cold, and dead inside. I couldn't help but think about the dream over and over. This happened about 13 years ago. I still remember it like it was yesterday. John, wherever you are, I'll never forget your kindness.
The night my father died, I experienced an overwhelming feeling of dread and anxiety. I was in another city in college. He died of a heart attack around 10 p.m. My mother didn't want me rushing home during the night, so everyone waited to tell me until the morning. I was out drinking at the bars and ended up leaving early due to feeling like shit. Indescribable feeling.
Wow, that's something. Reminds me of a dream that my coworker told me about. It was her grandma's. Basically, a bunch of men in suits showed up to her apartment door, demanding to be let inside to see her husband. She repeatedly told them no and to go away. Instead of walking downstairs and out the door, they headed up the stairs. The next day, IRL, the grandma found out that the neighbors upstairs died. I also had a dream of my grandpa in the basement, where they found him dead from a heart attack. He was kind of sheepish and embarrassed about the whole thing, saying, "Yep, that's where they found me," before telling me that he loved me and hugging me.
When I was 6, I fell off the fishing dock at my babysitter's house. My babysitter had moved on to feed the cows and didn't hear me. I panicked because I couldn't swim and the fish were still swarming because they had just been fed. I fell through the fish and went down to the bottom of the pond. I came back up. I was flailing with the fish, but no one was there to grab me. I dinked down to the bottom again. I surface again, still to no help. Back down I went. That's when I felt a hand grab me by my coat. I was pulled out of the water and placed on the dock on my stomach. I was fine. Thankfully, I had not inhaled any water. I coughed and cried for a few seconds. I sat up and looked around, wiping my eyes. My babysitter, the only other person around, came running to me. She asked what happened. I told her and she was confused. I told her I was pulled out of the water. She insisted I climbed out on my own as there was no one else around. I didn't, though. I remember this as well as one can with the limited recall ability of the human brain. I remember having one hand on my back and another on my stomach. Then I was laid down in the dock. My babysitter was at least 40 yards from me. When I finally cleared my eyes and looked around. Also, yes, my parents were mad. They had to find a new one, and my mother had to miss several days of work until they found one. They also weren't sure what to make of my explanation.
Sleep over girlfriend's house for the first time years ago. Hanging out in the living room together around 2 a.m. Everyone else is asleep. Hear loud footsteps upstairs. No one was up there. Go upstairs out of pure curiosity. Changing my clothes in girlfriend's bedroom. Noticed the blanket on the bed being dragged down. I only caught it in the corner of my eye, and it stopped as soon as I noticed. Run back downstairs. Louder footsteps for a few minutes. Sorry if some of it doesn't make sense. Full shoot though. Never really had an experience like that since. Everyone in the family told me their house was haunted. Didn't believe it until that night. It never really happened much afterwards though. 10 out of 10 prank if it was one, but I checked every room.
This sounds comparable to every poltergeist type activity I've ever experienced. When I notice it's happening, it stops. Either happens when I'm daydreaming or out of the corner of my eye. First, undeniable experience. Be 23. Have a friend over and talking about life. Have an iPhone 6 or some shit, one with a flat edge that would allow the phone to sit on and perpendicular to the table. Something heavy gets said. Go into a sort of trance. My perspective of said trance is being deep in thought, losing all my senses temporarily. Basically daydreaming while holding the point my friend brought up in my head. Phone slowly moves to a 45-degree angle to the table, originally a 90-degree, and holds itself there. Despite staring at the phone, I only notice the reflection on the darkened screen shift. Start to acknowledge and realize my phone moved. Shift focus back to the phone as it's setting itself back to a 90-degree rest, only catch tail end of movement. Immediately look to friend. Did you see that? Confirms he did. We both sit in silence for another 15 seconds staring at the phone. Neither of us were spooked. I had other experience before this, but it was stuff that could be ruled out one way or another, such as my CPU headset wire being tugged on and shaken violently, or a concentrated gust of wind and an object falling over in the direction of the burst. If I hadn't had a friend witness it as well, I'd likely write this one off too. Another, hat sitting atop my CPU tower, talking to friends on Discord, staring at my CPU monitor, not registering my sight. Kinda tranced again. Eventually I registered something out of place from the corner of my eye. Begin to move my head to the right to look at whatever the small silhouette was. Didn't get a chance to rest my eyes on it. Hat falls onto the floor about 8 inches to a foot from where the hat should have been. Catch the tail end of the event again, just the hat mid-fall. Falls straight down, no tumbling while falling. I set up a camera the day after hoping to catch anything moving while I'm at work. Instead, I capture what appears to be an EVP and one of my cats reacting to it while no one was home.
Walking to a candy store at about 9 a.m. a block away. Passed by a rather imposing pine tree with huge branches. A voice from inside called out to me and said, "Hey kid, come here." Went inside it to check it out. Someone sitting on a branch at least 10 feet off the ground, looking down at me. Teenage boy that dressed like he was a pilgrim. They asked if I wanted to play a prank on my mom. I agreed, so they told me to wait here. I sat down at the base of the tree and waited a good hour. Nothing. I asked if I could go and they were like, "Don't you want to see if your mom loves you or not?" Pissed off, I agreed and waited a bit longer. Get tired and pass out. Wake up a while later and the sun was setting. Could hear people calling my name. Heard my mom right outside the tree walking past it, so I jumped out and scared her. I was missing for 10 hours. She asked where I was and I told her I met a nice friend in the tree. She worriedly looked in there and said nobody was there. Entire neighborhood was searching for me. Mom explained everything. An older Irish woman demanded the tree be cut down and burnt. Owners of the house refused but agreed to cut the branches away so no kids could hide there again. Owners later moved away. Nobody has stayed there for more than 12 months. Tree has grown back completely. Irish woman is dead now. Every time I saw that tree growing up, I felt immense dread and avoided it.
Not that impressive, but it stuck with me for some reason. Be me, around 10 years old, visiting the ranch where my stepdad and mother lived. They were in the middle of nowhere while I lived in the suburbs with my biological dad. Stepdad and his adopted son show me around the ranch. We're walking through one of the less maintained parts of the place. There's a large bowl-shaped dip in the land's elevation, almost like a crater. We stop for a minute and rest while Stepdad explains that the dip used to be a small lake. Most of it dried up due to the severe drought at the time, although there was still a decent pond in the crater's center. As we continue walking, I turn around. Standing at the edge of the old lake is a pale, almost glimmering-looking figure, wearing a pair of worn, baggy overalls. I look away, look back, and he's not there anymore. Later mention it when we're back at the house. Apparently a farmhand drowned in the lake when stepdad's grandfather owned the ranch.
In 4th grade, temporarily living at Grandma's house with my mom. Heard scary stories about her house being haunted by ghosts of the previous owner. Apparently, after my grandma started rearranging the house, spooky shit begins. Fire alarms going off at like 2 a.m. Lamps turning themselves on all the time. Back door opening and slamming shut randomly. My grandma said the whole couch lifted off its front legs and tipped over backwards while she watched it from the kitchen. Fast forward to my first night sleeping there. Slept on the living room couch. I can't even close my eyes. I'm so paranoid and scared. I don't even hear or see anything. I start to feel like I went deaf. The whole body feels like it's shivering, but not moving. Nope, out of there and sleep on the floor in my mom's room. Never slept on the couch again. Actively avoided being in the living room while alone at night. Months later, I'm washing my hands in the bathroom and look up at the mirror. I notice the sliding door behind me that was about a foot slide completely shut without a sound, freaking out internally. I somehow calmly but quickly walk out of the bathroom without looking in the room behind me. Not much of a story, but I swear to God, I remember this happening, even though I was little. Shortly after that, my mom and I moved into our own house, and I don't think much more spooky shit occurred at my grandma's since then. It's really crazy and weird because nobody in my family is into ghosts or paranormal stuff, and my grandma had no reason to lie about the poltergeist shit that was going on previously.
I watched night turn to day in an instant. I'm talking from midnight to afternoon in an instant for roughly 30 seconds, then back to midnight. It happened while I was driving down my neighborhood, and it was such a jarring experience that I stopped in the middle of the street and got out of the car to look around me. I couldn't, and still have trouble, believing my own lived experience because I had no one around to say, yeah, I saw that shit too. I started yelling for anyone, just yelling, as I needed another person to confirm I wasn't insane. There was no light source in the clear blue sky, only the moon sitting by itself. There were no shadows cast. It was as if the light was simply present everywhere because, again, not a single source in the sky. Suddenly, it was night again, and after a hot moment of standing dumbfounded in the street, another car pulled up to a nearby intersection. Leaving my car, still in the middle of the street, I ran over in front of their car, waving my arms and yelling. There was an older couple in the car looking understandably confused/concerned, and they would only crack their window to talk to me. I asked if they had seen the light. They asked what light. I said the light was everywhere, as if the sun was out, but without the sun and without shadows. The older woman interrupted my mini-rant with, "Maybe you've had enough tonight." And in their faces I could tell, not only did they not see it, they wouldn't believe me, and the only thing I could do was slowly walk back to my car, get back in, and turn around to immediately drive back home. I live near a military base, one of the most important in the country. Whatever that means, apparently we're in the top 5 targets for nuke attacks. But every time I tell this story, I get a, "Whoa, that sounds crazy." But I can tell they either don't believe me or they fail to grasp the absolutely ridiculous experience of having night turn to day, then back to night.
I've had something like this happen to me once before when I was little, but I believed it to be like a micro-dream or something like that. All I remember is I went to bed facing my window and laid there for a minute. Since I was young at this point, I was in bed around 8 p.m. I think it took a couple blinks, and then all of a sudden, it was already the next morning, as I was still facing the window, in the same position that I had been holding for what felt like only 5 minutes. And I completely recall feeling like I skipped the night hours because I felt just as awake as I had 5 minutes prior, like I hadn't slept at all. That's all I remember because it's an early childhood memory of mine, but reading your story made me instantly bring that to mind.
Similar thing happened to me too. Around the age of 8 or 10, I laid my head back to sleep, closed my eyes, opened them in what felt like a blink. All of a sudden it's morning, and I'm in the exact same position. Especially weird since it would, and still does, take me a long time to fall asleep. I noticed immediately and was freaked out the whole day. Wasn't tired at all, though. I felt like I had gotten a full night's rest within one blink.
Be me, age 10-ish, laying in bed ready to sleep. My light is off, but the hallway light is on, and my door is open so light is coming in. Stare for over 5 minutes at the carpet where the light is coming in. See the shadow of a large man holding a machete. It wasn't a cardboard cutout because I could see it moving a bit by breathing. Scared stiff and laying on my side, I eventually built up enough guts to hop and flip over to my other side to sleep. It wasn't sleep paralysis because I've had sleep paralysis before, and I was definitely fully awake at the time. Plus, I hopped to lay on my left side. Different day, same age. Look in my drawer. White expressionless mask with purple lips. Nope.jpg. Scared stiff. I woke up in the morning. Nothing purple, but there was white underwear. Possibly just my mind playing tricks. Be me, age 18. Friend claims his old house is haunted. Break in at night while the house is vacant to hang out and listen for ghosts. Do this many times. Leave when we hear knocking on the walls, light switch being pressed, footsteps running down the halls, etc. We even recorded the hangouts and picked up voices that went unheard during the hangout. I am a firm believer in the paranormal.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.